Dogman versus Albino Bigfoot. Dear Scary Stories NYC. There is a range of mountains and valleys that extend from Pennsylvania down into West Virginia, where people see and experience very strange things. Out-of-place animals and possibly large birds, monsters with glowing red eyes, strange lights flying through the night sky, Sasquatch, and even Dogman. I have little doubt there are other things going on over there which we don't even know about yet. And in the middle of this most bizarre mountain range, there is a collection of natural areas dedicated to leaving the lands untouched, allowing them to maintain their aura of mystery into the present day and hopefully off into the future. In this one area you can find Roth Rock State Forest, Bear Meadows Natural Area, Thickhead Mountain Wild Area, Allen Seeger Natural Area, Whipple Dam State Park, Penn Roosevelt State Park, Greenwood Furnace State Park, Stone Valley Recreation Area, plus others I'm leaving out. My childhood was mostly spent in these lands, and I usually didn't even know which of them I was in most of the time. My parents loved nature and would take me camping with them on nearly every vacation, most of each summer, and on every 3-day weekend. Sometimes we would bring a friend from school, but generally it was just the three of us, and it was usually a very relaxed and fun time. Sometimes it was educational, such as the times we saw a bear, and my parents showed me how to react to that. Sometimes it was terrifying, like the times we encountered cryptids in those bizarre woods. I'm not going to lie to you and say that I ever enjoyed a cryptid run-in, because I didn't. When one of those things were around, my heart would beat fast and hard. My sweat would pour off my head like it was fired from a hose, and my eyes would uncontrollably tear up. We'd been haunted by a dogman who I rank as second scariest of all. The worst for me personally was this entity that spoke to us from outside. It knew our names, and it knew secrets that we never told each other. That was a horrible beast, but we never actually saw it, and we never found out what that was or why that happened. Some people have suggested it was a demonic force, something more like a ghost than a cryptid. If we hadn't all heard the voice at the same time, I'd almost list it as a hallucination. We don't know why that creature or spirit tormented us that night, and we don't know why it never came back again. Maybe we left in the morning. We moved around out there so often. I want to tell you about a Dogman experience, and I want to tell you about the time we saw the Pennsylvania albino Sasquatch. Then, I'd like to fill up most of the rest of this with the story that's in the title, the time we saw a dogman going berserker on that white Bigfoot, who was the much larger of the two. Now, my parents were naturalists and experienced outdoors people, but they also had a sense of awe for what they knew they could not understand. Some science-oriented naturalists behave as though science had already figured out all the answers. My parents, on the other hand, taught me that science is the act of questioning. It's not a set of finished rules. In fact, we had this running joke, natural or unnatural, in our family. We'd return to it whenever we would experience that Alice in Wonderland topsy-turvy world. For instance, I saw a dog standing on its hind legs in the woods one night outside our window. It was staring at something I couldn't see what, and it was standing perfectly still. I couldn't tell if it was leaning against a tree to increase its height in order to see something further off, or if it was actually an upright walking canid. So I called my mom over and I asked her, "Mom, natural or unnatural?" Mom looked out the window and said, glowing eyes, "Unnatural," and pulled the shade down on that and all our windows for the rest of that night. Between then and dawn, curiosity was driving me insane. I wanted to lift those shades and peek outside more than I wanted anything else. But I was too afraid to look out there and risk seeing the Dogman looking right back in at me. There was a similar time when I called out natural or unnatural because I thought I saw a big black dogman standing out in the woods past our house. This time, my father answered natural, just before the creature I thought was a black dogman dropped to all fours and revealed himself to be a big old black bear. We would rent cabins when we could, and so camping life had a similarity with our home life back in Pittsburgh. There were times, though, when we would be camping out in the wilderness, and my first really serious dogman encounter took place on a night where Mom and Dad had a tent, and I had a second smaller one. We had already eaten dinner, roasted marshmallows, identified as many star systems as we could in the night sky, and finally went to bed. I was awakened by this sound that I thought was my father messing around outside the tents. He had put the campfire out before we retired, but sometimes he would forget something and go back outside to fuss around while I was trying to get some sleep. He usually wasn't out there for long, so I waited for him to finish and go back to bed. Except he didn't. He kept fussing around out there and I wasn't able to get back to sleep. Frustrated, I unzipped my tent, intending to stick my head out there and ask Dad if I could help him with whatever the problem was. I was that certain it was my father that I unzipped, but before I could stick my head outside, I screamed as this horse-sized wolf head inserted itself in the tent opening and backed me up as far as I could go. Its front arms also invaded my privacy, and I had its nose in my belly, both smelling me and keeping me pressed up against the back wall of my tent, still screaming bloody murder. I could hear my father and mother asking me what was wrong, but all I could do was continue to scream because this wolf head was as big as I was, and by that point, it was exposing its teeth to me and growling in an unfriendly manner. The eyes had eye shine even in the dark of my tent. These were the days before personal handheld electronics, so it's not like I had a cell phone for its eyes to reflect back the light of. I think I might have owned a calculator and a transistor radio, and I don't know if I had either of them with me on that trip. I never felt so scared in my life. I was beyond panicked. My fight or flight instinct had kicked in, but I was trapped against the back wall of my tent and incapable of running anywhere. The breath of the Dogman was so hot that it almost burned my belly. It was around then that something started happening outside the tent, something which caused discomfort to the Dogman. He pulled back out of the tent, and I heard my father screaming like a complete lunatic. I thought he was being torn limb from limb by the dog-headed monster, but he was actually going nuts and screaming while waving a stick around in order to scare the Dogman off. He either succeeded or at least confused the beast enough that it did return to the dark woods, and my father stuck his head inside my tent to see if I was all right. When he saw that I was uninjured, he got a broad smile and asked me, natural or unnatural? Obviously, to me, that was unnatural. That was the Dogman. My father could joke around about things like that, but I could not. I climbed into their tent for the rest of that evening, but I don't think I got any more sleep. My dad could laugh off a Dogman experience, but I was very shaken up by those things. I still wish I could live on a planet that the Dogman never heard of. If I never see one of those again, it'll still be too soon for me. One time we rented a cabin but decided to have a picnic dinner at the edge of a clearing past some woods behind the cabin. The sun was going down, and the sky was all sorts of incredible colors. It felt like an extremely peaceful setting, but feelings can be deceiving. We began to experience small objects dropping on us. At first we thought it was because we were under the edge of the tree cover, so we moved. The pelting of our area with small objects continued even as we walked down out of the tree cover and over by the water. Then my mother saw it. She said, "Look at that big old white sheepdog." But even as she said those words, that sheepdog stood up, revealing itself to be a bipedal character, well over 6 feet tall. You tell me what looks like a white sheepdog but stands up like a man. Some people have suggested that it was Sasquatch, but I think that it was an albino Bigfoot or Sasquatch. The eyes were pinkish or reddish, and I think that supports the contention that it was an albino. All I know is that once we saw that thing, we all grabbed what we could carry, beating it out of there, and heading straight back to our cabin. The rest of that night, I had that feeling that we were being watched. I think my parents did too, because they put coverings up over the 2 windows in that cabin. There were a couple of sounds during the night, like small rocks hitting the roof, but my father told me I didn't hear them. "I'll let you know when you've heard something," I remember him warning me sternly. He could be a little like a military general sometimes, which is probably why we survived these incidents. The next time we saw that albino Sasquatch, he did not at all look like a sheepdog, which leads me to question if there might have been more than one albino Bigfoot in the Pennsylvania woods in those days. My parents outnumber me on this issue. They insist that both times we saw a white Bigfoot, it was the same exact one. They say we just interpreted it as a sheepdog the first time because of the way its head was so close to the ground. The second time we saw a large white furred bipedal creature, in the story I'm about to relate to you, it did not have a face in any way like a sheepdog. It had a face that looked like an extremely creepy looking mix between an ape and a human. It was like the worst of both worlds. The ugliest things about a gorilla or chimp face, combined with the ugliest features any human ever sported. Nature, or whatever designed this monstrosity, clearly made him extra frightening to look at in order to defeat its prey and opponents before even throwing a single blow. I think I would have remembered a face that ugly if it was what I had seen in that first incident. But let's say my parents are right and that this was the same white Bigfoot as the first time. Some people suggest to me that it must have been the Yeti or the abominable snowman. In fact, those are not colored white like a polar bear. They are darkly furred according to legend. The concept of a white furred Yeti appears in the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer cartoon by Rankin Bass. I think they may be responsible for inventing that notion. So what we saw was not a Yeti, but it was a white Sasquatch. We came upon it while hiking just before dawn from one campsite to another. We were about to enter a clearing when Dad stopped us and pointed out that the large white creature seemed to be scavenging a fallen deer at the far end of the clearing. We remained behind trees and watched for a considerable amount of time. My mother tried to take a picture, but her camera made clicking and whirring noises, and the Bigfoot got up and spun around, looking to find the source of those strange camera sounds. They echoed a bit through the valley as we ducked down and hid, and soon the great beast went back to his meal. I don't remember if the photo even ever got developed. We were about to breathe a sigh of relief when the guy you've been waiting for, the Dogman, came up behind us suddenly, forcing us to back into the clearing. We hadn't heard or even smelled his approach, and I'm still not sure if he was sneaking up on us or sneaking up on the Bigfoot and his large buck. Whether by accident or design, the Dogman's sudden appearance pushed us out into the field, which drew the big white creature's attention in our direction, and therefore, in the direction of the Dogman. This was when I got my first really good look at the albino Bigfoot. I do think it was albino because of how pink its eyes were. It wasn't just a white Sasquatch, it was albino, and an ugly one at that. It was also as large as it was nasty looking. I would guess this was maybe 8 feet, maybe taller. I'm guessing because I'm not good at judging heights, but this seemed larger than humanly possible, so I'd say 8 feet because 8 feet is too large to be a human. It was so close to human in proportions, but just a little off. The arms were a little too long. Its height was a little too impossible. It was right in front of me, but seemed like watching special effects somehow. It was hard to take your eyes off the thing. It was the most incredible creature I'd ever seen. The Dogman, by comparison, was the size of a tall man. He was built like an athlete, like a muscular but limber baseball or soccer player. He couldn't have been a man in disguise, though, because he had legs like a dog has, or rather, the hind legs of a hound. You couldn't fit human feet into those legs, so even though it only stood about 6 feet tall or slightly taller, it still could not have been a human being. When we backed out into the field, attracting the Squatch's attention, the Dogman for some reason followed us into that field. Again, I'm unclear what his motivation was in all of this. Was the Dogman after me and my family? Or did it want to scavenge what the Bigfoot was already scavenging? So now we were in this situation of being maybe 20 feet away from a wolf-headed animal man who just emerged from the woods in front of us, and an increasingly agitated white-furred albino Bigfoot about 100 feet behind us. Like I said, I'm bad at judging height and distances, but the Bigfoot was probably 5 times further behind than the Dogman was in front. To make things even more confusing, we were walking backward, away from the Dogman. I probably got my best look at the Dogman at that stage in the sequence of events, as it stood there in the very first light of dawn. The fur on the Dogman reminded me of a wolf's fur, the way different colors mixed to create an image of a gray dog. It was darker around the face and belly, where a normal wolf might be lighter. The skin under the fur was dark and leathery like a motorcycle jacket. Its eyes shone an almost white color, nothing like the pink color of the albino Squatch's eyes. The Dogman suddenly charged forward directly at where I was standing, so it was me he was after. When I saw my life flashing in front of my eyes, I ducked, dropping down to the ground, but still expecting the worst to happen any second. Instead, the great upright wolf bounded over me, each heavy footfall shaking the ground and bringing him step by step closer to the big white Squatch. So it wasn't me he was after. My dad grabbed my backpack and pulled me in the direction he and my mother were already running in. They just wanted to get away, while I wanted to find a good hiding spot to watch this fight from. We ran through the field diagonally away from the fight, so I was able to view the battle until we re-entered the woods on the far side. The Dogman barreled into the ape man, who appeared almost twice the other's size as they came together. Both of them fell into a tree, which split near the root. The enraged Bigfoot screamed like a woman being torn apart, and ripped much of what remained of that tree right out of the ground. It hurled the tree, which was heavy even for a Sasquatch, at the Dogman, who easily dodged the flying projectile and again leaped up onto the ape man. This time, the Dogman seemed to have his long claws stuck deeply into the matted, knotted fur of the immense white Bigfoot. No matter how the Squatch spun around or tried to get the Dogman off of him, the two only seemed to become more entrenched in each other. The ape man's terrifying squealing turned into a sickening gurgling sound as the canine man snapped savagely at the larger creature's throat. In that moment, even though the fight was still very much in progress, I realized that the Dogman could take down a creature far larger than he was. My family and I stood no chance against him, and my parents were wise to be running away at the fastest speed possible. As we found ourselves back in the woods, unable to watch the fighting any longer, I have to say that the sounds echoing through that valley were not sounds that gave the impression that the Bigfoot was winning. To be honest, he seemed a bit confused when the Dogman attacked, whereas the wolf-headed man never seemed to lack a battle plan at all in that fight. Assuming that Dogman did win, I think it was the result of his sheer savagery, his sheer willingness to do battle in the fiercest way imaginable, against the strongest foe possible. Our plans for that day were abandoned as we headed to an official campground and rented a cabin close to the office and public facilities. Whenever we'd have a close call like that, we'd go stay with the humans again for a while, until we got bored and felt adventurous all over again. But it took a long time before I personally felt adventurous again, after the morning that we witnessed the battle between Dogman versus Albino Bigfoot. Our executive producer is named Letitia, stronger than a free militia, cooler than most that you find yourself with. Our executive producer is named L. Smith. Please join us in welcoming one of our newest executive producers, Letitia Smith, and thanking her for making this episode possible. In exchange, Ms. Smith gets to watch our secret uncensored weekly Dogman stories, far too wild to ever run on this channel. And you can get these and other perks too. Either join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com, or else click that join link under this or any of our videos to become a Scary Stories channel member. Now here's international TV spokesmongrel Henry Lee Dogman to fill in any deets I may have left out. Hank? Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it with your friends and family that you think might also be interested. If you would like to see more of our work, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon next to the subscribe button so that YouTube will alert you when we put out a new video. To become a channel member and gain access to our special perks, you can click that join link under each of our videos. Another option is to join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. You can join for as little as 99 cents on YouTube or $1.50 at peterbernard.com, and that gains you access to our weekly secret uncensored episodes. If you'd like to see our 21 hours of archives of uncensored Dogman stories, then please join at the $3 level or above. To get to watch our shows in advance of the public, please join at our $10 level. That gets you all the perks. If you join our channel memberships, you need to check our community page here on YouTube in order to get the links to the secret videos and other perks. If you're in the PayPal subscribers club, Peter will email you all the news and links himself. Once joining the PayPal club, which is Peter's homemade club, please give him a chance to see that you've joined and to compose you a personal welcome email, as none of that is automated. But whichever you join, we'll name you an executive producer for the next available episode. Do you have a scary experience that you'd like to share with us? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LA-SCARY. That's 804-537-2279. It's a Google voicemail box, so that means it keeps cutting off after every 3 minutes. If your story is longer than that, please keep calling back and we can piece it together on our end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.